Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the window of the human ship Olive Branch, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. The station called Concordia was bigger than any human city, its metal surface gleaming under the light of 3 distant suns. Ships from across the galaxy surrounded it like metal fish swimming in an endless ocean. "First time seeing something like this?" asked Captain Marcus Webb, joining her at the window. Sarah nodded. "Makes our biggest space stations look like toys." She watched a crystal ship that seemed to be made of pure light drift past them. "Are you nervous, Captain?" Marcus smiled. "Should I be? We're just here to talk." "That's what they think too," Sarah said quietly. The invitation had come 6 months ago, delivered by a small alien probe that appeared in Earth's solar system. The message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council wanted to meet with representatives of the human race. They had been watching Earth for some time and decided it was time for formal contact. The probe's message was polite, but firm. Humanity had developed faster than light travel and had begun spreading to other star systems. This meant they were no longer just a local problem. The galaxy had rules, and new species needed to learn their place in the cosmic order. Earth's leaders had debated for weeks about how to respond. Some wanted to send scientists and diplomats. Others argued for sending the military. In the end, they chose Sarah Chen, a career diplomat who had spent her life solving impossible problems between nations. If anyone could navigate alien politics, it would be her. But they also sent Captain Webb and his ship, along with what appeared to be a small escort fleet. 39 other human vessels had accompanied the Olive Branch to the meeting point. To any watching aliens, it would look like a modest show of force from a young species trying to appear tough. The aliens had no idea how wrong they were. "Incoming. Transmission," announced Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "It's from the station. They're giving us docking instructions." "Put it on screen," Sarah said. The face that appeared was unlike anything most humans had ever seen. It belonged to a Zephyrian, one of the telepathic species that helped run the Galactic Council. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to shimmer, like water. Large black eyes stared out from an elongated skull, and when it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that made Sarah's teeth itch. "Human vessel Olive Branch, you are cleared for docking at Bay 77 Alpha. Your escort ships will remain in the designated waiting area. Station security reminds all visitors that weapons are not permitted aboard Concordia." "Understood," Sarah replied. "We look forward to the meeting." The Zephyrian's expression didn't change, but Sarah got the feeling it was amused. "Indeed, the Council is most eager to meet with your species." The transmission ended, and Marcus turned to Sarah. "Weapons not permitted, that's interesting. They probably think we're barbarians who can't control ourselves," Sarah said. "Let them think that. It works in our favor." As the Olive Branch approached the docking bay, Sarah reviewed what Earth's intelligence services had learned about the Galactic Council. 12 major species controlled most of the galaxy, with hundreds of smaller client races serving under them. The system had been in place for thousands of years, and it worked through a simple principle: might makes right. When a new species developed space travel, the Council would approach them with an offer. Join the galactic community as a client. Race, accept Council authority, and enjoy protection and trade. Refuse, and face the combined military might of civilizations that had conquered countless worlds. Most species chose to submit. The few that didn't were usually destroyed or forced into submission after brief one-sided wars. The Council had perfected this system over millennia. They saw no reason why humanity would be any different. Sarah knew better. She had read the classified reports that most people on Earth would never see. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first radio signals from space had been detected over a century ago. The governments of Earth had known they were not alone in the universe, and they had been getting ready for the day when the neighbors came calling. The docking process was smooth, and soon Sarah found herself walking through corridors that stretched higher than any building on Earth. Alien beings moved past them, some walking, others floating, a few that seemed to shift between different states of matter as they moved. The diversity was overwhelming, but Sarah forced herself to stay focused. Their escort was a tall, thin creature that introduced itself as Diplomatic Aide Kethvar. It belonged to a species Sarah didn't recognize, with gray skin and too many joints in its arms and legs. It moved with an odd, flowing motion that made Sarah think of seaweed swaying in an ocean current. "The council chamber is this way," Kethvar said, its voice coming from a device strapped to its throat. "The representatives are eager to begin." "How many council members will be present?" Sarah asked. "All 12 primary representatives, plus observers from 47 client species," Kethvar replied. "This is quite an honor. The full council rarely meets for first contact with primitive species." Sarah ignored the casual insult. "We appreciate their time." The chamber they entered was vast beyond imagination. Tiered seating rose up on all sides, filled with beings of every shape and size Sarah could imagine, and several she couldn't. At the center of the room was a raised platform where 12 seats were arranged in a circle. Each seat was designed for a different type of alien physiology. As Sarah and her small team took their positions at a smaller platform in the center, she studied the council members. She recognized most of them from intelligence briefings, the massive crystalline form of High Commander Veltar of the Vorthok hegemony, the flowing, almost liquid shape of Prime Consciousness Zethmai of the Zephyrian Collective, the barely visible outline of Ethereal Lord Nix Athalan of the Ethereal Dominion. Each of these beings represented a species that could destroy human civilization without breaking stride. Their combined fleets numbered in the tens of thousands of ships, each one more advanced than anything humanity had ever built, or so they thought. High Commander Veltar spoke first, its voice resonating through the crystal formations that made up its body. "Representatives of the human species, we welcome you to Concordia. We trust your journey was pleasant?" "Very pleasant, thank you," Sarah replied. "We're honored by this opportunity to meet with the council." "Good," Veltar continued. "We believe in being direct with new species. It saves time and prevents misunderstandings. We have observed your species for some time now. You have developed faster than light travel and have begun to establish colonies beyond your home system. This brings you under galactic jurisdiction." Sarah nodded politely. "We understand. The galaxy operates under certain principles," Prime Consciousness Zethmai added, its musical voice filling the chamber. "Order, stability, and respect for established authority. These principles have maintained peace for thousands of your years." "Peace is something we value greatly," Sarah said. "Excellent," Ethereal Lord Nixthalan whispered, its voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Then you will understand why we have called this meeting. Your species shows concerning tendencies toward violence and chaos. Your entire history is filled with wars and conflicts. This cannot be allowed to spread to the rest of the galaxy." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "What are you proposing?" High Commander Veltar leaned forward in its crystalline seat. "The Galactic Council offers humanity membership in our community. You will accept council authority over your military, forces, and colonial expansion. In exchange, you will receive protection, access to galactic trade networks, and the wisdom of species far older than your own." "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked. The chamber fell silent. Several of the council members made sounds that Sarah's translator interpreted as amusement. "That would be unfortunate," Prime Consciousness Zethmai said softly. "Young species who refuse council guidance often face difficult times. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for those without proper protection." Sarah looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces watching her. Some looked curious, others seemed bored. Most appeared to view this as a formality. They had seen this scene play out countless times before. "I appreciate the council's generous offer," Sarah said carefully, "but I need to understand the terms more clearly. What exactly would council authority over our military mean?" "Your species would disarm to an appropriate level," High Commander Veltar explained. "Client species are permitted defensive forces sufficient to maintain local order, but strategic weapons and large fleets are unnecessary when the council provides protection." "I see. And our colonies?" "Would be integrated into the council's territorial management system," Ethereal Lord Nixthalan replied. New colony sites would require council approval, and existing colonies would need to meet galactic standards for environmental protection and resource management. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. These are significant decisions. My government will need time to consider your offer. Of course, Prime Consciousness Zethmai said. We are not unreasonable. You have 72 of your hours to provide an answer. As the formal session ended and Sarah was escorted to guest quarters, she activated a small device hidden in her jacket. The signal it sent was brief and would look like random cosmic interference to any alien sensors. But 3 light years away, Admiral Chen Rodriguez received the message on the bridge of the Righteous Fury. Sarah's cousin smiled grimly as she read the coded transmission. Signal received, she announced to her staff. The Council wants our surrender in 72 hours. Orders, Admiral? Asked her Chief of Staff. Begin final preparations, Rodriguez said, and send word to the 3rd, 7th, and 12th. Fleets. Tell them it's time to show our new neighbors what humanity learned during all those wars they think make us primitive. Back on Concordia, Sarah stared out the window of her quarters at the human escort fleet hanging in space nearby. 40 small ships that the Council had dismissed as insignificant. They had no idea that each of those escorts was actually a heavily modified warship, packed with weapons and technology that Earth's best engineers had spent decades developing. More importantly, they had no idea that the 40 visible ships were just the tip of an iceberg that stretched across half the star system. Sarah activated her secure communicator and sent a brief message to Captain Webb. The Council thinks we're barbarians who fight too much. Tomorrow we show them exactly how right they are. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity hadn't spent centuries fighting each other because they were primitive. They had been practicing for the day when they would have to fight everyone else, and that day was less than 72 hours away. The second day of talks began with what the Council called a demonstration of unity. Sarah and her team were escorted to an observation deck that offered a perfect view of the space around Concordia Station. What she saw there made her breath catch in her throat, even though she had been expecting it. Ships filled the void in every direction. Thousands upon thousands of vessels from across the galaxy, representing the combined military might of the Council and its client species. The smallest ships were the size of Earth's largest aircraft carriers. The biggest ones could have swallowed entire cities. Impressive, is it not? Asked High Commander Veltar, its crystalline form refracting the light from the nearest star into rainbow patterns. This represents only a small portion of the Council's defensive capabilities. Sarah watched a ship that looked like it was made of living metal flow past the observation window. How many vessels are out there? Approximately 12,000 combat ships, Prime Consciousness Zethmai replied, its musical voice carrying a note of pride. Plus support vessels, the number approaches 20,000. Captain Webb, standing beside Sarah, let out a low whistle. That's a lot of firepower. Indeed, Ethereal Lord Nixthalan whispered. Perhaps your species is beginning to understand the reality of your situation. Sarah continued to watch the massive fleet. Ships moved in perfect formations, their movements coordinated with a precision that spoke of centuries of experience. Energy weapons flickered between vessels in what was obviously a training exercise, and several ships demonstrated their ability to phase in and out of normal space. Each of our member species contributes ships and technology to the common defense, High Commander Veltar explained. The Vorthak hegemony provides vessels capable of cracking planets. The Zephyrian Collective offers ships that can control the minds of entire populations. The Ethereal Dominion brings vessels that exist partially outside normal space-time. As if on cue, a massive crystalline ship began to glow with internal light. Energy built up along its surface until suddenly, a beam of pure destruction lanced out toward a distant asteroid. The rock, easily the size of a small mountain, simply ceased to exist. Planet Cracker class weapon, High Commander Veltar said casually. Quite effective for removing obstacles. Sarah nodded appreciatively. Very impressive. How long did it take to develop that technology? Approximately 3,000 years, Veltar replied, though the basic theory was established much earlier. And the phase shift capability we saw earlier? A gift from the Ethereal Dominion, Prime Consciousness Zethmai answered. They have been masters of dimensional manipulation for over 5 millennia. Sarah continued to ask technical questions about the various weapons and defensive systems on display. She inquired about power sources, targeting systems, and shield technologies. She asked about communication methods, command structures, and logistics. The council members seemed pleased by her interest. They interpreted her questions as those of someone trying to understand the magnitude of the forces arrayed against her species. They were happy to demonstrate their superiority and explain why resistance would be futile. They had no idea that every answer was being recorded and transmitted back to Earth through quantum communication devices hidden throughout the human delegation's equipment. Military analysts on Earth were mapping the Council's capabilities in real time, identifying weaknesses, and developing countermeasures. Your questions show wisdom, Ethereal Lord Nixthalen observed. Most primitive species simply react with fear or anger when shown the reality of galactic power. You seek to understand. Understanding is the foundation of good diplomacy, Sarah replied. My species values knowledge. Excellent, High Commander Veltar said. Then you will appreciate learning about the structure of galactic society. Come, let us return to the council chamber for a more detailed discussion. The afternoon session focused on what the council called integration procedures. They explained how humanity would fit into the existing galactic hierarchy. As a new client species, humans would start at the bottom of the social order. They would provide resources and labor to more established species in exchange for protection and technology. The system has worked for thousands of years, Prime Consciousness Zethmai explained. New species begin as clients to experienced mentors. Over time, as they prove their worth and stability, they may advance to higher levels of autonomy. How long does this process typically take? Sarah asked. It varies, High Commander Veltar replied. The Karathi achieved full membership after only 800 years. The Velen required nearly 2,000. It depends on how quickly a species adapts to civilized behavior. Sarah looked around the chamber at the various alien observers. And those who never achieve full membership? They continue to serve the galaxy in their appropriate capacity, Ethereal Lord Nixthalen said. Not every species is suited for leadership. The galaxy requires workers, soldiers, and resources. There is honor in all forms of service. The discussion continued for hours. The council outlined their expectations in detail. Humanity would surrender most of its military forces, keeping only local defense units. Human colonies would be subject to council oversight and resource quotas. Human technology would be shared with the council for evaluation and approval. In exchange, humanity would receive protection from external threats, access to limited galactic technologies, and the privilege of participating in the galactic economy as junior partners. These terms seem quite generous for a species at your level of development, Prime Consciousness Zethmai noted. Many client species receive far less favorable arrangements. We appreciate the Council's consideration, Sarah said diplomatically. But I'm curious about enforcement. How does the Council ensure compliance with these agreements? The question seemed to amuse several Council members. An excellent question, High Commander Veltar replied. The galaxy operates on trust, but trust must be verified. Council enforcement fleets conduct regular inspections of client worlds. Any violations of galactic law are corrected swiftly. What sort of violations are most common? Unauthorized. Weapons development, Ethereal Lord Nixthalen replied. Illegal expansion beyond approved territories. Attempts to contact or influence other species without permission. Failure to meet resource quotas. And the penalties for such violations? They scale with the severity of the offense, Prime Consciousness Zethmai said. Minor violations result in economic sanctions or technological restrictions. More serious offenses require direct intervention. Direct intervention? High Commander Veltar's crystalline form flickered with internal light. Pacification operations. The Council has found that a single demonstration of consequences usually prevents future violations. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I see. And these pacification operations are carried out by the fleets we saw today? Among others, Ethereal Lord Nixthalan confirmed. The Council maintains enforcement assets throughout the galaxy. Response times are typically measured in days, not weeks. As the session drew to a close, High Commander Veltar stood from its seat. We have been most patient in explaining the realities of galactic society. Tomorrow, we will require your species' answer. We trust that your government will make the wise choice. The only choice, Prime Consciousness Zethmai added. Cooperation brings prosperity. Resistance brings only suffering. That evening, Sarah met with Captain Webb and her security team in the heavily shielded communications room of their guest quarters. The room was equipped with the most advanced electronic countermeasures Earth could provide, but they still spoke in whispers. How long until the Third Fleet arrives? Sarah asked. Webb checked his chronometer. 18 hours. The 7th and 12th are 6 hours behind them. And our assets already in the system? All in position, Webb confirmed. Stealth platforms are deployed throughout the outer system. Hunter-killer squadrons are maintaining silent running at designated coordinates. The surprise will be complete. Sarah nodded. The Council is overconfident. They've been the galaxy's bullies for so long that they can't imagine anyone challenging them. Their mistake, Webb said grimly. They think our escort fleet is the extent of our military capability. They have no idea what Earth has been building. Through the quantum communicator, Sarah received an update from Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Righteous Fury. The message was brief but clear. All human forces were in position and ready for action. Earth's most advanced fleets were hidden throughout the system, invisible to Council sensors and waiting for the order to reveal themselves. Send a message to Admiral Rodriguez, Sarah told the communications officer. Tell her that the Council expects our surrender tomorrow at the noon hour station time. She should be ready to provide an alternative answer. As her team prepared for what would likely be their final night on Concordia Station, Sarah stood at the window of her quarters looking out at the massive Council fleet. Tomorrow, those ships would learn what humanity had accomplished during its violent history. The Council saw human warfare as evidence of primitive brutality. They didn't understand that every war, every conflict, every battle in human history had been a learning experience. Humanity had spent millennia developing new ways to fight, new technologies to gain advantages, and new tactics to overcome superior forces. The Council had grown strong by conquering primitive species who had never faced organized resistance. They had become comfortable with their superiority, confident that their advanced technology and vast numbers made them invincible. Tomorrow they would discover the difference between being strong and being ready for war. Sarah opened her personal communicator and sent a final message to Earth. The Council believes they are offering us generosity. They see our questions as the desperate attempts of a doomed species to understand their fate. They have no idea that we're gathering intelligence for the war they're about to start. The response from Earth came quickly. Understood. Operation Prometheus is authorized. Show them what humanity learned from all those wars they think make us barbarians. Outside her window, the Council fleet continued its lazy patrol around Concordia Station. Soon those ships would learn that humanity hadn't come to the peace talks hoping for mercy. They had come to give the galaxy a lesson in what happens when you threaten Earth. The final session began exactly at noon, station time. Sarah Chen walked into the Council chamber with her head held high, knowing that this would be the last time she stood before these aliens as a supplicant. In a few hours, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. The chamber was packed with observers from across the galaxy. Word had spread that the newest species was about to give their answer to the Council's generous offer. Most expected to witness another submission ceremony, where a primitive race would accept their place in the galactic order. High Commander Veltar's crystalline form gleamed with satisfaction as Sarah took her place at the central podium. Representative, Chen, has your government reached a decision regarding our offer? Sarah looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many observers as possible. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast space. High Commander, members of the Galactic Council, we have indeed reached a decision. After careful consideration of your terms, humanity must respectfully decline your offer. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several council members exchanged glances that their translators interpreted as disbelief. Prime consciousness. Zethmai's musical voice cut through the noise. Decline? Perhaps you did not understand the terms clearly. This was not a negotiation, but an integration process. Your species has no choice in this matter. With respect, Sarah replied, every species has choices. We choose to remain independent. Ethereal Lord Nixthalan's barely visible form seemed to flicker with anger. Your response shows why your species is unfit for self-governance. You lack the wisdom to recognize reality. High Commander Veltar stood from its seat, the crystal formations of its body ringing like bells. Representative Chen, let me speak. Plainly, your escort fleet consists of 40 primitive vessels. Outside this station are 12,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your entire species controls perhaps a dozen star systems. The Council commands thousands. What possible basis do you have for refusing our generous terms? Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several nearby observers shift uncomfortably. High Commander, you're absolutely right about the odds, but you're making one crucial mistake. Which is, you assume that what you can see is all there is to see. Before anyone could respond to her cryptic statement, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber. In Reda's automated systems announced a developing situation. Unknown contacts detected throughout the system, the station's AI announced. Multiple stealth signatures resolving into active sensor contacts. Classification: military vessels of unknown origin. The chamber's main display activated, showing a tactical overview of local space. What they saw sent waves of shock through the assembled aliens. The 40 human escort ships were no longer alone. Around them, space seemed to bloom with new contacts, as cloaked vessels dropped their stealth systems. Hundreds of ships appeared where empty space had been moments before. Sleek, predatory-looking vessels that radiated menace even through the tactical display. But that was just the beginning. Long-range sensors detecting massive energy signatures at the system perimeter, the AI continued. Multiple fleet-sized formations approaching at high velocity. The display zoomed out and gasps echoed through the chamber. 3 enormous formations of ships were racing toward the inner system. Each formation contained hundreds of vessels, and they were moving, faster than anything the Council had ever seen. Impossible, High Commander Veltar whispered. Our intelligence indicated that humanity possessed only a primitive space force. Sarah's smile widened. Your intelligence was wrong. You see, High Commander, you made the same mistake that every bully makes. You assumed that because you hadn't seen our full strength, we didn't have any. Prime consciousness. Zethmai's mental voice cracked with strain. How many ships do you have? In this system right now? About 4,000. And that's just the advance force. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing alarms. Council members stared at the tactical display in disbelief as human fleet formations maneuvered with precision that spoke of extensive training and coordination. Ethereal Lord Nixthalan spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the grave. You came to peace talks with a battle fleet. We came to peace talks hoping for peace, Sarah corrected. But we came prepared for war. We suggested you reconsider your position, but you seemed quite confident in your superiority. High Commander Veltar's crystalline form flared with angry light. This changes nothing. Your forces may be larger than expected, but our technology is superior. Our ships have capabilities your primitive vessels cannot match. Is that so? Sarah asked, pulling out a small communication device. Admiral Rodriguez, are you monitoring this transmission? A new voice filled the chamber, speaking with the calm confidence of a seasoned military officer. Loud and clear, Ambassador. Admiral Chen Rodriguez commanding the Third Fleet. Should I demonstrate our primitive capabilities? Before anyone could respond, the tactical display showed something that made every council member freeze in horror. Several of the massive Vorthak planet cracker ships began to glow with the energy buildup that preceded their devastating attacks. But instead of targeting asteroids or planets, they were aiming at the human fleet. Vorthak vessels are powering weapons. Admiral Rodriguez's voice announced calmly. All human ships execute Protocol 7. What happened next redefined the galactic understanding of space warfare. The human ships didn't scatter or try to evade the incoming fire. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the Council fleet. But they didn't move like any ships the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels began to spin end over end while maintaining their forward momentum, presenting impossible targeting solutions. Others split apart into multiple smaller craft that the Council sensors had somehow missed. Still others simply vanished from sensors entirely, reappearing in completely different locations. When the Vorthak planet crackers fired their devastating energy beams, the human ships were no longer where they had been. The beams carved through empty space while human vessels appeared among the Council formation like ghosts. Impossible, High Commander Veltar repeated. How are they moving like that? Sarah's expression remained calm. You've been the dominant power in this galaxy for thousands of years. You've grown comfortable with your superiority, but you've never faced an enemy that spent its entire history learning how to fight against superior forces. The human ships were now in close combat with the Council fleet, and what the aliens saw challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Human vessels rammed into ships 10 times their size, their hulls somehow surviving impacts that should have destroyed them. They fired weapons that seemed to bend space itself, hitting targets that were supposedly protected by shields and armor. A Zephyrian mind control ship attempted to dominate the crew of a human destroyer. Instead of succumbing, the human ship immediately turned and fired a salvo that somehow passed through the Zephyrian's mental barriers and destroyed the vessel completely. How? Prime Consciousness Zethmai gasped. Our mental defenses are absolute. Against organized minds, maybe, Admiral Rodriguez's voice replied. But human thoughts are chaotic, random, and frankly a little crazy. We don't think the way you expect us to, so your mental attacks just bounce off. An ethereal Dominion ship tried to phase into an alternate dimension to escape a pursuing human cruiser. The human ship followed it, somehow matching the dimensional shift and destroying the ethereal vessel in what should have been an inaccessible realm. Our dimensional technology is beyond your understanding, Ethereal Lord Nixthalan protested. We've been studying your energy signatures for months, came the reply. Turns out that once you know what to look for, dimensional phasing is just another form of movement. We built weapons that can fire into multiple dimensions simultaneously. The battle was turning into a rout. Council ships that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were being systematically destroyed by human vessels that fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical insanity that the aliens couldn't counter. Impossible, High Commander Veltar said for the third time. Your species is primitive. Your technology is inferior. How are you defeating us? Sarah walked closer to the Council seats, her expression serious. High Commander, you keep using that word. Primitive. I don't think it means what you think. It means. She gestured toward the tactical display, where human ships continued to tear through Council formations. You see warfare as a tool of conquest. You build bigger ships, more powerful weapons, stronger defenses. You fight to dominate. Another explosion lit up the display as a human torpedo somehow penetrated a Council dreadnought's shields and armor, destroying the massive vessel in a chain reaction of secondary explosions. Humans fight to survive, Sarah continued. Every war in our history taught us something new. Every battle showed us a different way to win against impossible odds. You think our violent history makes us primitive. Actually, it makes us the most experienced warriors in the galaxy. Prime Consciousness. Zethmai's mental voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? The same thing we wanted when we came here, Sarah replied. Peace, but on equal terms, not as your subjects. The tactical display showed the arrival of the 7th and 12th human fleets, adding another 2,000 ships to the battle. The Council fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was being systematically dismantled. This is your final warning, Admiral Rodriguez announced. Order your remaining ships to stand down or we'll finish what you started. High Commander Veltar looked around the chamber at its fellow council members. Fear was visible in every alien face. The old order that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years was crumbling before their eyes. Stand down, Veltar finally commanded. All council ships, cease fire, and withdraw to minimum safe distance. The battle ended as abruptly as it had begun. Human ships pulled back to defensive positions, allowing the surviving council vessels to retreat. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed them all, but chose mercy instead. Sarah turned to address the chamber one final time. The age of council dominance is over. From now on, this galaxy operates on the principle of equality between species. No more client races. No more enforced submission. No more threats against species who refuse to kneel. She paused, looking directly at each council member. We came here hoping you would choose peace. You chose to threaten us instead. Consider this a lesson in why that was a mistake. As Sarah and her delegation prepared to leave the chamber, Ethereal Lord Nix Thalan called out. What happens now? Sarah stopped and turned back. Now? Now you learn to live in a galaxy where humanity is an equal partner, not a subject. And you pray that the species you've oppressed for thousands of years are more forgiving than you deserve. The chamber remained silent as the human delegation departed, leaving behind a galactic order that would never be the same again. The news of the Council's defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every inhabited system knew that the impossible had happened. The Galactic Council, rulers of known space for thousands of years, had been humbled by a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight. On the bridge of the human flagship Righteous Fury, Admiral Chen Rodriguez studied the tactical displays showing the aftermath of the battle. The Council fleet had withdrawn to the outer edge of the system, their formations broken and demoralized. Many ships showed battle damage, and several of the massive dreadnoughts that had been the pride of their fleets were now expanding clouds of debris. Damage report, Rodriguez requested from her chief of staff. Minimal losses, Admiral, Commander Sarah Park replied. We lost 14 ships total, with another 37 suffering various degrees of damage. Enemy losses include over 400 vessels destroyed and approximately 800 damaged. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The numbers told the story clearly. The Council's superior technology and overwhelming numbers had meant nothing against human tactics and determination. But she knew this was only the beginning. Admiral, her communications officer announced, we're receiving emergency transmissions from across the galaxy. Dozens of client species are requesting immediate contact with our forces. Patch them through to the diplomatic channels, Rodriguez ordered, and send word to Earth. They need to know that we've just started a galactic revolution. 3-star, systems away, the Karathi were the first to act. For 800 years, they had served as a client species of the Zephyrian Collective, providing resources and labor in exchange for protection. They had been one of the more successful client races, gradually earning small increases in autonomy through decades of loyal service. But they had never forgotten what independence felt like. Captain Torvak of the Karathi Defense Force stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, watching the Zephyrian monitoring station that orbited his homeworld. For 8 centuries, that station had been a symbol of their subjugation, monitoring their communications and ensuring compliance with Council edicts. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we've confirmed the reports from Concordia. The human fleet defeated the entire Council armada. Torvak smiled, showing the sharp teeth that had once made the Karathi feared predators on their homeworld. Then it's time to remind the galaxy who we used to be. All ships, target the monitoring station. The Zephyrian station's commander tried to establish telepathic contact with the attacking Karathi ships, attempting to reassert mental control over the rebellion. But the Karathi had spent 800 years developing mental disciplines specifically designed to resist Zephyrian influence. The telepathic commands that had once been irresistible now fell on minds hardened by centuries of careful preparation. Within an hour, the monitoring station was destroyed, and the Zephyrian garrison on the planet's surface had surrendered. The Karathi sent a simple message to the human fleet at Concordia. We stand with you. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. The Velen, who had served as soldiers for the Council for 2 millennia, turned their weapons on their former masters. The Thurnak, whose homeworld had been conquered before their species had even achieved spaceflight, rose up against the occupation forces that had controlled them for generations. But the most shocking rebellion came from the Ascari. The Ascari had been the Council's most loyal servants for over 3,000 years. They were natural administrators and bureaucrats, managing the complex logistics that kept the galactic government functioning. Every council member relied on Ascari advisors and administrators to handle the details of governing their vast territories, which meant the Ascari had access to everything. Master Administrator Colvin sat in his office in the Council's central archives, surrounded by data cores containing the detailed records of galactic civilization, military deployment schedules, resource allocation plans, diplomatic secrets, and personal communications between council members. All of it had passed through Ascari hands at some point. The message from his subordinates was clear. 3/4 of the Ascari administrative staff across the galaxy were ready to act. They had been secretly copying critical data for decades, preparing for the day when they might have a chance at freedom. Initiate Protocol Sunrise, Colvin ordered into his communicator. All units implement total information disclosure. Within minutes, classified council documents began flooding galactic communication networks. Military positions, secret weapons research, details of atrocities committed against rebellious species, evidence of corruption and abuse among council members. Everything the Ascari had quietly documented during their centuries of service. The revelations shattered what remained of council authority. Species that had remained neutral or supportive of the old order were horrified to learn what had been done in their names. The careful image of benevolent guardianship that the council had cultivated for millennia crumbled under the weight of their own documented crimes. Back at Concordia Station, High Commander Veltar and the remaining council members watched their empire collapse in real time. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Rebellions on dozens of worlds, defections among their most trusted allies, and the complete breakdown of the administrative systems that had kept their civilization functioning. "This is madness. Prime. Consciousness," Zethmai wailed, its musical voice distorted by panic. "The humans have destroyed everything we built." "We destroyed it ourselves," Ethereal Lord Nixthalan replied, its form flickering with despair. "The humans simply gave our subjects the courage to resist what we had done to them." High Commander Veltar stood silent in the center of the council chamber, its crystalline form dim and lifeless. Around them, the other council members argued and blamed each other for the catastrophe, but Veltar was remembering something from the early days of its species' rise to power. The Vorthak had not always been conquerors. Millions of years ago, they had been explorers and scientists, using their crystal technology to study the cosmos and share knowledge with other species. They had joined the original council as equals, working together with other races to build a better galaxy. But power had corrupted them. Victory had made them arrogant. Success had convinced them that they deserved to rule over others. And now, the galaxy was reminding them of the price of that arrogance. A communication request came through the chamber's systems. The sender was Ambassador Sarah Chen, calling from the human flagship. "Council members." Her voice was calm and professional. "I'm contacting you to discuss the current situation." "What more do you want?" High Commander Veltar asked wearily. "You've already destroyed our fleets and turned our own subjects against us." "Actually, High Commander, you did that yourselves," Sarah replied. "We simply gave the galaxy a choice. Your former subjects chose freedom over security. Your allies chose justice over stability. Your own administrators chose truth over loyalty." Prime consciousness. Zethmai's voice was bitter. "So you've come to gloat over our defeat?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I've come to offer you the same choice we offered you 3 days ago. Peace on equal terms." The chamber fell silent. None of the council members had expected this. "You could have destroyed us completely," Ethereal Lord Nixathalan observed. Why didn't you? Because that's not who we are, Sarah replied. Humans have fought countless wars, but we've also learned the value of mercy. We don't want to rule the galaxy any more than we wanted to be ruled by you. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we also won't tolerate a return to the old system. The age of galactic empires is over. From now on, every species gets to choose its own path. High Commander Veltar considered this carefully. Around the galaxy, the old order was collapsing. Their fleets were scattered. Their authority was broken, and their subjects were in open revolt. They could continue fighting and risk complete annihilation, or they could accept this new reality. What are you proposing? Veltar asked finally. A new galactic assembly, Sarah replied. Every species gets an equal voice regardless of size or technological level. No more client races, no more enforced tribute, no more threats against independent worlds. And if we refuse? Sarah's voice hardened slightly. Then you'll face the same choice your own subjects faced for thousands of years. Submit or be destroyed. The difference is we'll give you a real choice instead of an ultimatum disguised as generosity. The council members looked at each other, seeing the truth reflected in their alien expressions. They had lost everything that mattered. Their fleets, their authority, their subjects' loyalty. The only thing they had left was the choice of how to face the future. Very well, High Commander Veltar said finally. The Vorthak hegemony accepts your proposal. One by one, the other council members voiced their agreement. The Zephyrian Collective, the Ethereal Dominion, and all the others, each choosing survival over pride. Excellent, Sarah said. Prepare your representatives for a new constitutional convention. We have a galaxy to rebuild. As the transmission ended, the former council members sat in the ruins of their chamber, contemplating a future where they would be equals rather than rulers. Outside the station, human ships maintained their positions, a constant reminder that the balance of power had shifted forever. But across the galaxy, on worlds where species had known only servitude for generations, celebrations were beginning. The age of empire was ending, and the age of equality was about to begin. And it had all started with a species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive barbarians who fought too much. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the barbarians at the gate aren't there to destroy civilization, they're there to save it from itself. 1 year after the Battle of Concordia, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the podium in the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of New Geneva. The hall was filled with representatives from over 300 species, each seated according to the new galactic principle that had become the foundation of interstellar civilization: one species, one vote. The transformation had been remarkable. Where once the galaxy had been ruled by 12 dominant powers controlling hundreds of client races, now there was true representation. The massive Vorthak sat next to the tiny whisper folk whose entire population could fit inside a single human city. The ancient ethereals shared voting blocks with species so young they had only discovered fire when humanity first reached the stars. The first year of the new galactic assembly has exceeded all expectations, Sarah announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. Trade between species has increased by 400%. Scientific cooperation has led to breakthroughs that benefit everyone, and most importantly, we've had no wars. Applause rippled through the assembly, a sound that included clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and a dozen other forms of approval from species across known space. In the front row, High Commander Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with what Sarah had learned was the Vorthak equivalent of satisfaction. The former council members had adapted to their new circumstances better than anyone had expected. Stripped of their imperial power, they had rediscovered the scientific and cultural pursuits that had originally made them great. The Vorthak were sharing their crystal technology freely, helping dozens of species develop new forms of energy storage. The Zephyrians had established a galactic communications network that allowed instant telepathic contact between willing participants across the galaxy. Even the mysterious ethereals had emerged from their dimensional hideaways to share their knowledge of space-time manipulation, leading to revolutionary advances in faster-than-light travel. But the real success stories were the former client species who were now free to determine their own destinies. "I would like to call forward Representative Torvak of the Karathi Federation," Sarah announced. The Karathi captain who had fired the first shots of the Galactic Revolution approached the podium. His species had transformed their entire society in just 1 year, evolving from a client race focused on resource extraction to a federation of explorer scientists pushing the boundaries of known space. "Fellow beings," Torvak said, his translator converting his growling language into something the assembly could understand. "1 year ago, my people were miners and laborers, digging up resources for our masters. Today, we've established colonies in 3 previously unexplored systems and discovered 2 new forms of exotic matter that could revolutionize energy production." He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. "This is what freedom looks like. This is what we can accomplish when we're allowed to choose our own path instead of following orders from those who see us as nothing more than useful tools." More applause followed, and Sarah noticed that even some of the former council members were joining in. The revolution had been hard on everyone's pride, but it had also freed them from the burden of maintaining an empire that had grown too large and corrupt to manage effectively. "I would also like to recognize the contributions of the Askari Administrative Corps," Sarah continued. "Their complete documentation of the old system's abuses has been invaluable in ensuring that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past." Master Administrator Colvin stood and bowed slightly. The Askari had become the galaxy's unofficial historians and record keepers, maintaining vast databases of information about every species and their interactions. But more importantly, they had used their administrative skills to help design the new government structure, ensuring that no single species or alliance could accumulate enough power to dominate the others. "The new system isn't perfect," Colvin admitted when invited to speak. "We still have disputes over territory, disagreements about trade policies, and cultural misunderstandings that sometimes lead to tension. But we resolve these issues through debate and compromise, not through threats and military force." Sarah nodded appreciatively. The transition hadn't been entirely smooth. Several species had tried to establish their own mini-empires in the chaos following the Council's collapse. A few former client races had sought revenge against their former masters. There had been territorial disputes, trade wars, and cultural conflicts. But humanity had been ready for these challenges too. The human fleets that had defeated the Council hadn't disappeared after the battle. They had repositioned themselves throughout the galaxy as peacekeepers, intervening when conflicts threatened to spiral out of control. But unlike the Council's heavy-handed enforcement, human intervention focused on mediation and protection of the weak rather than punishment of the strong. "The role of humanity in this new order deserves special recognition," said a voice from the assembly floor. It belonged to Zethmai, the former prime consciousness of the Zephyrian collective, who had become an advocate for telepathic rights and mental privacy laws. "When we first met the humans, we saw them as primitive barbarians," Zethmai continued, its musical voice carrying a note of humble reflection. "We believed their history of warfare made them unfit for civilized society. We couldn't have been more wrong." The former Zephyrian leader stood and faced the human delegation. Humanity's willingness to fight wasn't a sign of primitive brutality. It was preparation for the responsibility of protecting others. They didn't seek to replace our empire with their own. Instead, they dismantled the very concept of galactic empire and gave every species the chance to be free. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but also responsibility. The galaxy was watching humanity's every move, looking for signs that Earth might succumb to the same corruption that had destroyed the Council. Some species still feared that the humans were simply playing a longer game, building trust before revealing their true imperial ambitions. They couldn't have been more wrong, but Sarah understood their concern. Power had corrupted every previous galactic civilization. Why should humanity be different? The answer, she believed, lay in human nature itself. Humans had spent their entire history fighting against oppression and tyranny. Every culture on Earth had stories of heroes who stood up to bullies and dictators. The idea of ruling over others went against fundamental human values that had been shaped by millennia of struggle for freedom and equality. "I want to address the concerns that some of you still have about human intentions," Sarah said, returning to the podium. You're right to be cautious. History shows that power corrupts, and that even the most well-intentioned civilizations can become the very thing they once fought against. She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. That's why humanity will never accept a position of permanent leadership in this assembly. We propose that the position of assembly coordinator rotate among all member species, with no species eligible to serve consecutive terms. This announcement caused a stir throughout the hall. Several species had been expecting humanity to claim a leadership role as a reward for their liberation of the galaxy. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we propose that any species that attempts to establish dominance over others be automatically expelled from the assembly and subjected to collective action by all remaining members. High Commander Veltar rose from its seat. That rule would apply to humanity as well? Especially to humanity, Sarah replied firmly. We've seen what power did to the Council. We won't let it happen to us. The Vorthak commander considered this for a long moment. Your species continues to surprise us, Ambassador Chen. Very well. The Vorthak hegemony supports this proposal. One by one, other species voiced their agreement. The principle was simple, but revolutionary. No single species would ever again be allowed to dominate the galaxy. The moment any civilization showed signs of imperial ambition, the rest of the galaxy would unite to stop them. As the assembly session continued, Sarah's thoughts turned to the report she would send back to Earth that evening. The revolution was succeeding beyond their wildest hopes. Trade was flourishing, scientific advancement was accelerating, and hundreds of species were experiencing freedom for the first time in their histories. But there were also signs of trouble on the horizon. Long-range scouts had detected signals from beyond the galactic rim, suggesting that there were other civilizations out there. Some appeared to be sending probe ships toward known space, possibly investigating the sudden change in galactic politics. More concerning were the reports from the galactic core, where ancient automated systems left behind by long-dead civilizations were beginning to activate. The energy signatures suggested weapons of unimaginable power, possibly triggered by the collapse of the Council's control networks. Humanity had proven that they could defeat any known military force in the galaxy. But the universe was vast, and there were threats out there that no one had ever faced before. As the assembly adjourned for the day, Sarah found herself approached by a small group of representatives from some of the galaxy's most distant systems. Their species were among the newest members of the assembly, having only recently achieved space travel. Ambassador Chen, one of them said through a universal translator, our long-range communications have detected something troubling. There are signals coming from the direction of the Andromeda galaxy. They appear to be military in nature. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The galaxy had just achieved peace and stability, and now they might be facing a threat from beyond, their own spiral arm. How long until these signals reach us, she asked. Unknown, the representative replied, but our best estimates suggest that whatever sent them is already on its way here. That evening, Sarah sent her report to Earth, but she also included a special addendum for Admiral Rodriguez and the military leadership. The galaxy had been unified and freed from tyranny, but the universe was vast and full of unknowns. Humanity had proven they could win a war against a corrupt galactic empire. Soon they might need to prove they could defend a free galaxy against whatever threats emerged from the cosmic dark. The message she sent was simple. Mission accomplished. New challenges incoming. Stay ready. On Earth, military leaders read her report and smiled grimly. Humanity had spent its entire history preparing for war. They had defeated the Galactic Council, not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior preparation and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect freedom. The galaxy was free, but freedom always came with a price. Eternal vigilance. Humanity was ready to pay that price for as long as necessary. As Sarah looked out at the stars from her quarters on New Geneva, she thought about the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto since the liberation. They asked for our surrender. We brought them evolution. The galaxy had evolved beyond empire and tyranny. Now it was time to see if it could evolve enough to face whatever was coming from the dark between the stars. But that was a challenge for another day. Tonight, 300 species slept safely in their beds, free to choose their own destinies for the first time in thousands of years. And in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, human sensor platforms maintained their silent watch, ready to give the galaxy advance warning of any new threats to the freedom that had been bought with courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to fight when fight was the only option left. The peace talks had failed, but from that failure had come something far better than the Council's forced submission. A galaxy united in freedom, equality, and the determination to never again allow tyranny to masquerade as order. Humanity had kept its promise. They had come armed and ready, and they had used that readiness not to conquer but to liberate. The galaxy would remember this lesson for generations to come. Freedom was not a gift to be received. It was a right to be defended. And as long as humanity stood watch, that defense would never fail.